Hello fellow Misfortunates and welcome to the Rank 1 Samira guide. So there is this Samira player on the North American server who is sporting an enormous 84% win rate on the champion. The result is a massive gain of 676 LP, and they incidentally also climbed to global rank 1 on the Samira leaderboards. But what is this player doing differently compared to everyone else? What is their secret? Well, the first thing you notice when you look at their profile is that they go for a rune page that is both standard and off-meta at the same time. The primary rune path of Conqueror, Presence of Mind, Legend Bloodline and Cutdown looks very familiar. Even after all the nerfs Conqueror got to this day, the keystone is still just perfect for Samira because she is an ability-based marksman who gets a lot of value from the scaling attack damage bonus. Presence of Mind is a common pick as well, so you always have enough mana to actually cast your abilities even in very long teamfights. You could argue for the rune Triumph as well, because Samira is forced to dash into melee range with her all-in combo, but Presence of Mind is the more reliable choice overall. There are other ways of negating the enemy's damage, and Legend Bloodline is definitely one of the better ones. Despite being ability-based, your auto-attacks with Samira are still extremely important, especially when you consider that you even have an attack speed steroid in your kit. On top of that, your two most important damage abilities, namely your Q and your ultimate, in fact are coded to apply lifesteal as well, so Legend Bloodline is the perfect match here. With Cutdown, however, our rank 1 player is already starting to get a little more creative. The rune is by no means unviable on Samira, but it is typically a niche pick against very tanky team compositions. The rank 1 player on the other hand picks it every single game, and you will shortly realize why. Now for the secondary rune path, you typically see Taste of Blood in combination with Ravenous Hunter on Samira. Again, more healing means more safety for your all-ins, which is why most people prefer the domination path here. The rank 1 player has different plans though and goes for Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm secondary. Samira is mostly picked in lanes with engaged supports like Pyke or Alistar in order to bully your lane opponents with your early all-in power. This rune page, however, is already telling us that this player doesn't like to rely on random solo queue supports. Instead, they are playing Samira as a late-game hypercarry, and they pick Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm and even Cutdown every single game to deal as much damage in the late game as humanly possible. Actually a very interesting approach, especially for Samira one-tricks, because you cannot expect that every single support player who ends up on your team wants to pick an engaged support. Playing Samira is very tricky when your support picks a rather passive enchanter or mage champion, but later on in the video we will have a look at how the rank 1 player manages this exact situation. Anyway, before we do that, let's have a look at the item build this player uses. It is a very streamlined build, and itemization on Samira is rather straightforward to begin with, so this will be quite easy for you to copy in your games. The typical 6-item build is Shield Bow, Plated Steel Caps and Collector for your core items, and Infinity Edge into Lord Dominic's Regards with Guardian Angel last item for your late game. Shield Bow and Steel Caps are there to protect you when you dash into melee range where the enemy is free to focus you down. Together with Legend Bloodline, you will reach 19% lifesteal, which is definitely quite low compared to the standard Samira build. But when you are smart about your engage timings, it should be more than enough. Your third item, including boots, is the only true choice you will have to make in your own games, because here you need to look at the opposing team composition. Collector would be your preferred option because your abilities scale super hard with crit, AD and armor penetration, and the execute passive is extremely strong when combined with Samira's reset mechanic on her E-spell. If the enemy team has armor stacking tanks, however, you will have to buy Lord Dominic's Regards' third item and delay your Collector until 5th. There is no foolproof formula to make this decision because it depends on a multitude of factors. Which champions are on the enemy team exactly? How fed are they? How fed are you? All of this matters when you choose between Collector early versus Lord Doms early. I will give you a quick rule of thumb though. If there are at least 2 tanks on the enemy team, buy Lord Dominic's after boots and Collector after Infinity Edge. If there is only 1 tank or even 0, buy Collector after boots and Lord Doms later. Keep in mind though that even against 0 tanks, Lord Dominic's Regards is still a must-buy in the late game. Even squishy carries and mages gain a substantial amount of base armor merely by leveling up, so Lord Doms will always be your biggest damage increase here. Infinity Edge should be self-explanatory, and your last item slot is technically a little more flexible. You pretty much can't go wrong with Guardian Angel, but other semi-defensive options like Bloodthirster, Mercurial Scimitar or pressing the subscribe button are also perfectly viable here. Oh, and for the sake of completeness, the rank 1 player's skill order is the standard Q-max into E-max with 1 early point in W. But let's now finally jump into the actual gameplay and see what we can learn from this exceptional Samira player. As I've mentioned earlier, Samira's lane phase is typically very support dependent. If she can combo off of her support's knock-up spells, you are going to have a good time in lane, but if not, things are a little more tricky. Now with a Sona by her side, Samira can't use her passive dash at all, and even post level 6, Sona's ultimate is merely a stun, which means Samira still doesn't get value from a passive knock-up extension. Naturally, the enemy will have full lane priority in that matchup, so patience is key here. Despite only having 500 attack range, you can still farm very safely with Samira's Q. This makes it quite difficult for the opponents to pressure you away from your minions, so if you have to play it safe on Samira, you are highly unlikely to get punished for it. Keep in mind, it is not only the fact our Samira player went for a full late game rune page, but Sona is a hyperscaling support as well. The enemy is effectively on a timer here, and the pressure to make plays during the early game is on them. If they fail to do this, they will get outscaled. Nonetheless, the Sona-Samira combo is extremely exploitable in lane, and more aggressive junglers like Nidalee will take advantage of this. But if your support dies, that's whatever. Just try to not die yourself in a situation like this and you should be fine. Oh, and Sona does this a lot. Our Samira player certainly didn't win the support lottery this game. Anyway, once the time is ripe, you should be ready to do what Samira does best. Being able to follow up on a stun gives you plenty of time to stack up your ultimate with your all-in combo, and since you know that Cassiopeia's ultimate is already on cooldown, no one will be able to stop you. Even when you are forced to play the lane phase very passively, it is crucial that you remember to instantly flip that mental switch and go full ham during actual teamfights. But if you simply wait for the frontliners to do their job, you should be fine. As soon as the first bot lane tower finally falls and laning comes to an end, good teamfight opportunities will present themselves to you more frequently, but you still need to maintain a healthy amount of CS. The standard macro play to ensure you get the best of both worlds is to clear the closest minion wave as quickly as possible, then walk towards your team and simply rinse and repeat. This way you will be in the perfect position to take full advantage when one of your allies catches an overextended enemy. Note how Samira never goes in first. Her passive already tells you that she is designed to be a follow-up champion in teamfights, and you will see the best results when you fully embrace that playstyle. Now Vi gets a very crucial pick on the opposing jungler. Not only are the enemies now in a 4 vs 5 situation, but they also don't have access to their smite spell for a potential Baron steal. That means they either have to fight you or they lose Baron. Naturally, that's music to Samira's ears. All she needed to do was to wait for one of her teammates' stuns to connect. As soon as that happens, she instantly drops Baron to unleash her full combo on the lockdown target. The reset mechanics take care of the rest. Should you ever find yourself in a similar position to that of Red Team here, your best course of action is to simply retreat and give up Baron. Losing an objective is better than fighting with numbers disadvantage, inevitably dying because of it, and then losing the objective anyway. Knowing when and how to cut your losses in League of Legends is a crucial skill that will make it way more likely for you to make comebacks happen. By the way, this Sona is tilted. I'm not sure why, but she is. Anyway, even when you get the snowball rolling on Samira, you still need to remember how team-reliant a champion you are. Needlessly overextending like this is a reliable method of feeding away your shutdown gold, which you should be guarding as much as possible if you want to win in the end. Especially after taking down an inhibitor, your best macro play is to group in that lane in which the most opposing towers are still intact. In this case, that's top lane. Not only are these towers the most difficult for the enemy to defend, but they are also free gold, experience and vision control for your team. Instead, staying grouped in a lane in which you've already taken down the inhibitor is probably the #1 low elo macro mistake. You can achieve exactly nothing in such a lane, which means you are needlessly dragging out the game and thereby give your enemies plenty of time to catch up in terms of items. In contrast to that, those top lane towers here are completely free and there's nothing the enemy can do about it. Take the free stuff, win the game. That's the mantra you should follow. Unfortunately, our Samira player blunders the following teamfight quite hard. Can you spot the mistake? Yeah, she wasted her shield bow running into all of the enemy's poke damage, and then she dashed right into Cassiopeia's ultimate. The enemy's crowd control will ruin your day if you're not careful enough. In fact, blue team actually gets clean aced here and loses the next Baron as a consequence. One mistake when playing AD carry in the late game can go a long way. You have to be extremely cautious. Anyway, since red team is still far from finishing the game, our Samira player here will get a chance for redemption. It's actually pretty crazy how hard Samira gets countered by grounding effects like Cassiopeia's or Singed's W. But in this case, it still wasn't enough to protect red team from her massive all-in damage. If you want to learn even more about Samira from the best Samira players on the planet, then click the link on your screen right there.